Okay, so good morning to everyone, and yeah, so let's begin today's lecture. Okay, so in the last lecture, right, we looked at languages, right? So we're looking at this question of decidability of problems, right? And we said that Turing machine is the most powerful computing abstraction, and therefore any language that is for which there does not exist a Turing machine which defines that language is undecidable. Right? In fact, we said that languages which are not recursive, right, which means that for those languages for which there cannot exist a total Turing machine, right, are undecidable, right? And so we demonstrated the first language that is not even recursively enumerable, which is the diagonalization language. Right? And then using this diagonalization language, we further inferred that the membership problem, right, which is this problem uh, uh, of so the language containing strings of the form M11X, right, where X belongs to L of M. So this particular language is recursively enumerable, but it is not recursive, right? And therefore it is also undecidable. And then we saw the halting problem, uh, which which is a language which consists of strings of the form M11X, such that M halts on X, and this particular language is also not recursive, and therefore it's also undecidable. And then we saw the complement of the halting problem, which is not even recursively enumerable, right? So far these are the languages that we have seen that are undecidable, right? But then, so in today's lecture, right, we will see this theorem called Rice's theorem, which says that undecidability, right, is the rule; it's not the exception. Which means that saying anything about the language of a Turing machine, right, or deciding anything about the language of a Turing machine is not possible. Right? So this means that properties of any kind of property, right, like for example, the infiniteness property, whether or not a language is regular, a language is context free, and so on, right? So there are an infinite number of such properties, and all of them are basically undecidable, right? In the sense that if you're given a Turing machine, right, and if you want to say something about the language of the Turing machine, then that cannot be done. Okay. So today we will see the exact statement of Rice's theorem, and we'll also take some steps towards proving Rice's theorem. So note that all of these problems, right, are basically problems about Turing machines, right? Which means that we are basically saying that okay, I want a Turing machine, right? So I want to develop an algorithm, which means I want to develop a total Turing machine, which can take some arbitrary Turing machine, right, and say something about the language of that Turing machine, right? So it's this fact, right, that the Turing machine.
I didn't catch that. Could you try again?
Yeah. So it's this fact that a Turing machine, right, can be described in a finite manner, right? So there exists a finite encoding of the Turing machine, right, which describes the complete behavior of this Turing machine, and this finite encoding can be given to another Turing machine, right? Uh, it's this very fact, right, that the Turing machine can operate on another Turing machine, which this self-referentiality that results in undecidability, right? Because we used diagonalization uh, to demonstrate this undecidable language, the very first undecidable language. And diagonalization is only possible if you can enumerate all the Turing machines, right? Which is only possible if there are finite encodings of Turing machines. Okay, uh, right. So that's something that I wanted to point out, right? That what is the special thing about a Turing machine, right? That makes deciding that makes deciding anything about the Turing machine not possible, right? So it's this fact that a Turing machine can operate on another Turing machine, right? So there is a self-referentiality. Okay. Uh, Right. So in the last lecture, we also defined properties of languages, right? So, property is just a set of languages, right? Uh, and so, given a language, right? So let's consider the set of all languages, right? So, if you take some arbitrary language, then it either satisfies the property or it does not satisfy the property, right? So, if it satisfies the property, then it is in the yes instances, right? So these are all the yes instances. So they form one set of languages, and then all the no instances form another set of languages, right? So for example, if the property is the infiniteness property, right, then all the infinite languages form one set and all the finite languages form the other set, right? Uh, and so we want to design algorithms to decide properties of languages, right? So given a language, we want to say, okay, does it belong in the yes instance of is it a yes instance or is it a no instance, right? That's what we want to find out. And how do we actually so when we say, right, that we want an algorithm which takes as input a language can in general be infinite, right? So how can the algorithm take as input this infinite language, right? So that's why we use a finite description of the language, which is nothing but its Turing machine, right? So therefore we are looking for so we are looking for algorithms, right, which take as input some Turing machine and decide whether or not the language of the Turing machine satisfies this property, right? Uh, and this is different from so we are looking at properties of languages, right? We are not looking at properties of the Turing machine. So we demonstrated this using some examples in the last lecture, which are not properties. So this sort of distinction is important because Rice's theorem only applies to properties of languages, right? Not properties of Turing machines. So that's why you need to be careful when you are so if you're given some property, right, you need to figure out whether or not it's a property of the language or it's a property of the Turing machine. Okay. So, okay, so let's continue today, right? So let's say that you are given some property P, right? And let's say that LP, uh, so this particular set, right, LP, uh, is the set of the encodings of those Turing machines such that Turing machines M such that L of M has the property P, right? So you look at the set of all recursively enumerable languages, right? So correspondingly, there are the Turing machines which are going to define those languages. And now you consider all of those Turing machines, which are basically yes instances of the property. So which means that L of M has the property P. And this LP is the set of the encodings of all of those Turing machines. Okay. So there are some properties which are trivial. Right? So in fact, there are two properties which are trivial, right? Which means that for these, so this when we say the property is trivial, if it is either always false or it is always true, right? So the always false property says that for every RE language, right, the property is false, which means that there are no yes instances, right, of RE languages which satisfy that property. Okay? And the always true property says that every RE language, the property, so every RE language is a yes instance of this property, right? Which means that uh, the set of yes instances contains all possible RE languages, right? So these are two trivial properties, and they are obviously decidable, right? Because if you are given some arbitrary Turing machine, right, I can just say, right, that its language. If I'm looking for the always false property, I can say that no, this arbitrary Turing machine, right, its language is not going to satisfy this property. Similarly, if I'm looking for the always true property, then I'm going to say yes, it's going to satisfy the always true property, right? So these are two trivial properties. Every other property, right, has at least one RE language for which the property is true, and at least one RE language for which the property is false. And these are non-trivial properties. And Rice's theorem says that for every such other non-trivial property, P, LP is undecidable. Right? So this, when we say this language is undecidable, we mean that the so if so you can't design a Turing machine, right? Or you can't design a total Turing machine which would take some arbitrary Turing machine, right, and say that whether or not the language of that arbitrary Turing machine satisfies the property P or does not satisfy the property P. Okay? And this is true for every non-trivial property. Okay. Right. So in order to prove Rice's theorem, we are going to we are going to proceed in this fashion, right? So first we will prove that recursive languages are closed under complementation, right? So this is very easy to prove, right? And we will need this particular lemma later on, right? So then we introduce this important technique which is called reduction, okay, where an algorithm converts one instance of converts instances of one problem to instances of another problem. And so this technique is crucial, right, in showing undecidability, right? So we will look at this technique in detail, right? And then using reduction we will show that Rice's theorem holds. Okay, so that's the plan for today. So let's look at closure of recursive languages under complementation. Right? So complementation is very straightforward, right? So if L is a language with alphabet sigma star, then the complement of L is nothing but sigma star minus L. So these are the set of all strings in sigma star which are not present in L. Okay? And we generally denote complement of L by this L sub L superscript C. So LC denotes the complement of C. So in the last lecture, right, we saw that the class of recursively enumerable languages are not closed under complementation. So we showed that the halting problem, right, is recursively enumerable, but its complement is not recursively enumerable, right? However, the recursive languages, right, are closed under complementation. So which means that if L is recursive, then L complement is also recursive. And it's very easy to sort of see this, right? Because if L is recursive, right, then that means that there is a total Turing machine, right, that defines L, right? So there is a total Turing machine, let's say M, such that the language L is equal to L of M, right? Since this is an algorithm, right? This M is an algorithm. It's a total Turing machine. That means that this M can take some arbitrary string, right? And if that string, let's say X, belongs to L, then it's going to halt and accept. And if it does not belong to L, then it's going to halt and reject, right? So now I can easily design a Turing machine for LC, right, by simply simulating this M, right? And whenever M halts and accepts, right, then this Turing machine that I'm designing is going to reject, right? But whenever M halts and rejects, then this Turing machine is going to accept. And in that case, the language of this new Turing machine is going to be exactly L complement, right? And it's going to be an algorithm, right? It's going to be a total Turing machine as well. So that's the construction, right? So if L is equal to L of M, for some arbitrary TMM, then we construct this Turing machine M prime from LC for LC. And M prime has one new final state. So this is the only final state that M prime has. Let's say this state F. Okay. So M prime is basically going to simulate M, and if M enters an accepting state, um, right? So if M enters an accepting state, right, that means that the string is in the language L, right? So in which case M prime is simply going to halt, right, without accepting. So remember that M prime has just one new final state, right, which is this F. So any final state of M is not a final state of M prime, right? So therefore, if M enters some final state and halts, then M prime is also going to halt at that state. But since it is not a final state, it's not going to accept, right? And if M halts without accepting, right? So if M halts at some non-final state, then I'm going to have a transition from that non-final state to the state F, right, which is the final state of M prime. So if M halts without accepting, then M prime instead has a move taking it to the state F. And the state F, M prime obviously holds. So the language of M prime then is exactly L complement. So an important corollary of this particular lemma, right, is that if L is undecidable, then L complement is also undecidable. So remember that if L is undecidable, then there does not exist a total Turing machine which can define L. Okay. Uh, Now let's say that so then that would imply that L complement is also undecidable, right? Because if L complement were to be decidable, right, then remember that the complement of L complement is L itself, right? So if L complement is decidable, then using the total Turing machine of L complement, I can design a total Turing machine for L itself. But I just said that L is undecidable, right? So that would contradict the antecedent, right? So that's why if L is undecidable, then L complement is also undecidable, right? So is this corollary that we are actually going to use later on. Okay. So are there any questions so far? Okay. So let's look at this concept of reduction. Uh, so what is a reduction, right? So a reduction is defined. So a reduction is a function, right? So it's a function from sigma star to sigma star, right? And so it takes strings, right? And then it converts them into other strings, okay, into another string, right? So in fact, there's a unique string. So a reduction is defined in the context of languages L and L prime, and this is an algorithm, right, which is basically a Turing machine that always halts, that takes a string W and converts it to a string X, but it satisfies the property that this X is in L prime if and only if W is in L. Okay. So it takes so it basically takes a string W, right, and then it converts it into a string X, right. But if W is in L, right, then X is going to be in L prime. And similarly, if X is in L prime, then W is going to be in L. Right? So this is the constraint that reduction is going to satisfy. Right? So reduction is a function which maps a string to another string. This reduction uh, must also be computed, right, using an algorithm, right, which means using a Turing machine that always halts, right. So we'll see exactly what we mean by that. Right? And it should also satisfy this constraint in the context of languages L and L prime, that if W is in L, then X is going to be in L prime. Okay. So we said that this reduction must be computable by a Turing machine. Right? So what do we mean by that? Right? So Turing machines can also be seen as transducers. Right? So we have regarded Turing machines as acceptors of strings. Right? So this Turing machine, right? It begins with so far the way we have used Turing machines, right, is that they begin with the start state, right, and the string uh, that it's going to operate on the tape, right, and then it basically analyzes, right, scans the string depending upon its transitions, and finally it moves to either a final state, right, or a non-final state. So it either halts at a final state or a non-final state, or it simply loops forever, right. So this is the notion of Turing machine as acceptors of string, right. But we can also think about Turing machines as transducers, right, which means that they convert the input to some output. So in this context, right, the Turing machines can be thought of to have an output tape, right? And so here again, the Turing machine is going to begin with the string present on one of its tapes, which is, let's say, the input tape, right? And then it's going to perform some computation, and finally, when it halts, it is going to have some string written on the output tape, right? And in this case, like, what's really happening is that the Turing machine is converting whatever is written in the input to the output, right? So it's basically working as a transducer. So when we say that a reduction is should be computable by a Turing machine that is total, what we mean is that there must exist a Turing machine which behaves as a transducer, right? Uh, and it basically takes as input the string, right? And when it halts, right, and it's guaranteed to halt, it's going to write the corresponding reduction, right, of that string on its output tape. So such a TM translates its input to its output. So the reduction function, that is basically computed by the Turing machine. Okay. So what's the advantage of having these reductions, right? Or why is it that we have defined these reductions, right? So if we can reduce L to L prime, right, which means if there is a reduction from L to L prime, and if L prime is decidable, right, which means that there exists a total Turing machine which decides L prime, then the algorithm for this reduction to L prime. So there is the algorithm for L prime, right, which is the total Turing machine for deciding L prime, plus the algorithm of the reduction from L to L prime would show that L is also decidable, right? So essentially, I have this Turing machine, right? Let's say M, to basically reduce L to L prime, and then I have this Turing machine from L prime itself, right? So let's say M prime. So then using M and M prime, I can design another Turing machine for the language L itself, right? So this Turing machine, right, this new Turing machine that we're designing would basically first simulate. So on its input, it will first simulate this machine M, right, which is the transducer, so that it will convert its input string to the corresponding reduction, right, of the input string. Okay, and then it's going to run the Turing machine for L prime, right, which is this M prime, right? And if M prime accepts, then then this new Turing machine is also going to accept. If M prime rejects, then this new Turing machine is also going to reject. Right? And because of the property of reduction, right, that if W is in L, right, then its reduction X is going to be in L prime. I can say that the language of this new Turing machine that we have designed is going to be L itself, right? So which would mean that L would also be decidable, right? Because we have just constructed a total Turing machine for L. Right? So that's why if we can have a reduction from L to L prime, right? And if L prime is decidable, then L is also decidable. Right? So we use reduction now in its contrapositive form, right? Which means we say that if we know, right, that L is not decidable, then L prime cannot be decidable. Right? So which means that we have this language L, right? So I designed this reduction, let's call it sigma, from L to L prime. Right? So I know that if L prime is decidable, right, then L is also decidable. Right? And its contrapositive would be that if I know that L is undecidable, right, then that would imply that L prime is also undecidable, right? Because otherwise, if L prime were to be decidable, then L would actually also become decidable, right? But I already know that L is not decidable, so that's why I can say that L prime is also going to be undecidable, right? So essentially, to show that L prime some language, right, is undecidable, I basically take a language which is known to be undecidable, right, and then demonstrate a reduction from that language to my input language. So that's how I use reductions. So we will see many examples of reductions, right, to make this point clearer. So, so the theorem is that if there exists a reduction from L to L prime, right, and if L is undecidable, then L prime is also undecidable. Okay. So that's what we will use, right, in order to demonstrate that some language is undecidable. And we can also use reductions to prove that a language is not recursively enumerable. Right? So remember that if a language is undecidable, right, it can still be recursively enumerable. So we saw the halting problem, right, or the membership problem. So these languages are undecidable, but they are still recursively enumerable. Right? So we can also use reductions to prove that a language is not recursively enumerable. Right? So this theorem is then very similar to the theorem for undecidability, right? Which is that if there exists a reduction from L to L prime and L is not recursively enumerable, then L prime is also not recursively enumerable. Right? So this means that if so why does this hold, right? So if there is a reduction from L to L prime, right, that means that there is this total Turing machine, right, that can compute this reduction from L to L prime, right? So now if L prime were not to be recursively enumerable, right, which means that there exists a Turing machine, not necessarily total, right, which can define L prime, then this reduction Turing machine plus this Turing machine for L prime can be used to construct a new Turing machine for L itself, right? Which would mean that L would become recursively enumerable, right? But we just started with the assumption that L is not recursively enumerable. Right? So that's why this theorem holds. Right? So in order to demonstrate that some language is not RE, I have to show a reduction from a language that is known to be not RE. Okay. Um, so let's look at some examples now of reductions. So this first example, we have already seen this example. So we saw it in the last lecture, right? When we tried to prove that the halting problem LH is undecidable. Right? So the halting problem LH, right? Let me just revise. Right? Is basically the set of all strings of the form M11X such that M halts on X. Right? And in order to prove that this language is not recursive, right, which means it is undecidable, we showed a reduction from the membership problem, right? So we reduced LU to LH, right? So LU is the language of the universal Turing machine. So it's of the form M11X such that M, or rather X, belongs to the language of L. Okay. So what did we do, right, in the last lecture, right? So in the last lecture, right, we said that given an instance of the membership problem, right, So given some Turing machine M and the string X, I constructed another Turing machine M prime, right? And this Turing machine M prime, right, was constructed. So how did we construct this Turing machine M prime, right? So we said that okay, this M prime, right, on its input is simply going to simulate M, right? And then if M accepts, right, which means that M is also going to halt, right? Then M prime is also going to halt, right? But if M rejects, right, then M prime is going to enter an infinite loop. Right? So this means that whenever M accepts X, right, which means that X belongs to L of M, then this new Turing machine M prime is guaranteed to halt on X. But if M rejects X, right, which means that either it halts at a non-final state or it loops forever, then in that case M prime is not going to halt, right? Because if M rejects, then M prime is going to enter an infinite loop, and if M enters into infinite loop, then M prime is since it is simulating M, it's also going to remain in that loop, right? So basically we showed this reduction, right? That given M11x, we constructed this M prime such that M11x belongs to L of U if and only if M prime 11x belongs to L of H. So if X belongs to L of M, then M prime is going to halt on X. And if X does not belong to L of M, then M prime is not going to halt on X. Okay. So we showed both the directions. Uh, and this is basically reduction, right? So now I can directly use the theorem that I mentioned in the previous slide, right? So since I have a reduction from a language which is known to be undecidable, right, which is this membership problem, right, uh, to the halting problem, right? So I can say therefore that the halting problem is also undecidable. So, and remember that we also need to demonstrate this transducer, right? Which given a description of M11x is going to construct this machine M prime. Right? So this we can very easily do, right? Because M prime, right, is basically just simulating M, right? And it's adding this extra cases, right? That if M prime, or rather if M goes to a non-final halting state, then M prime is going to get into this infinite loop, right? So these are just some extra transitions that you need to add to the description of M in order to obtain M prime. Right? So that's why we can very easily construct this Turing machine. Right? So there is another Turing machine, which is this transducer. It's going to take the description of M. It's going to say take some arbitrary description of M, and it's going to construct this description of M prime. Okay. Uh, but I have not explicitly shown this particular the description of that Turing machine, which is the transducer Turing machine, but it's very straightforward to see. Okay. So any questions so far? Okay, so let's look at another example, right? Uh, so let's see what this particular language is first, right? So it is undecidable whether a Turing machine M can reach some state Q on any input. Okay. So this means that formally, right, this language of this Turing machine, which is given by LR, right, uh, is of the form. So the strings in this language are of the form M11 0 to the power Q, right, where the 0 to the power Q is basically. So remember that while encoding this Turing machine, right, we said that uh, every state, right, is given an integer. Right? So this Q, the state Q, right, is basically an integer, right? And it is encoded by the string 0, which is repeated Q times, right? So M110 is the encoding, M110Q is the encoding, 0 to the power Q is the encoding of the string, right? And what we mean, right, is that Q is reachable in M, right? Which means that there is some string, right? So there exists some string X such that if M were to operate on that string X, then the state Q will eventually be reached, right? After some number of steps. Okay? And this is basically the language, right? So we want to design another Turing machine now. Right? So when we say I want to decide this property, right, which means that I want to design another Turing machine which would take this description M110Q, right, and determine, right, whether or not Q is reachable on some input. Right? And we can show that this particular problem, however, is undecidable, right? Which means that I cannot design a Turing machine which can do that. So for doing this, again, I'm going to use reduction, right? So if I want to use reduction, then I have to find out another undecidable problem, right? And then reduce that undecidable problem to this problem. Okay. So the undecidable problem that I'm going to use is the halting problem. So, but before, let's just say that I cannot directly use Rice's theorem, right? Because this is not a property according to the Rice's theorem. Right? So the Rice's theorem only applies to properties of languages, but this is a property of the Turing machine, right? So therefore, we cannot directly use Rice's theorem. Right? Similarly, the first example, right, which is the halting problem, it's also not a property of a language. So that's why I cannot directly use Rice's theorem. Okay. So let's look at this reduction from the halting problem to this problem LR. Okay, so the reachability problem. So the halting problem, remember, has strings of the form M11x such that M halts on X. Right? While this LR has strings of the form, let's call it as M prime 110 to the power Q, right? Such that Q is reachable in M prime. Okay. And I want to reduce strings of this form M11x to strings of the form M prime 110Q such that if M halts on X, right, then that can happen if and only if this state Q is reachable in M prime. Okay, so how do I design this particular Turing machine M prime? Uh, so let's look at this reduction. Right? So given M11X, we are going to construct this machine M prime. Okay. And this reduction is actually very straightforward, right? So what we'll do, right, is that this M prime is basically going to simulate. So M prime will have some input, right? So it's going to totally ignore that input, and it's only going to simulate M on X. Okay. So M prime is going to simulate M on X, right? And if M halts on X, right, then this M prime is going to go to the special state Q, right? And if M does not halt on X, which means that M simply runs forever, then M prime is also going to run forever, right? Because it's only simulating M on X, and therefore M prime is also not going to reach the special state Q. Okay. So that's the reduction, right? So basically, if M halts on X, then M prime is going to reach the state Q, and if M does not halt on X, then M prime is not going to reach the state Q. So M prime is going to ignore its input, and it's going to simulate M on X, right? And if M halts, then M prime moves to a special state Q, right? And that's it, right? So in this case, if M halts on X, then M prime is going to reach the special state Q. But if M does not halt on X, then M prime will never reach the special state Q, right, on any input, because it totally ignores its input anyway, right? Uh, so, so that's it, right? So that's the reduction, and that since LH is undecidable, therefore LR is also undecidable. Okay. Uh, so note that again, we need to demonstrate, right, that this particular reduction can be performed by some other Turing machine, right? So there exists this transducer Turing machine that would take the description of M and X, right? So that it will take this M11X and then it will construct this machine M prime, right? But that's very easy, right? So M prime, all it's doing, right, is just it. So the transitions of M prime are the same as the transitions of M, right? Along with this special transition to the state Q, right? And this input X is also hard coded, right? So in the sense that you may say that this M prime is first going to write X on some tape, right? And then it's going to simulate the actions of M on that particular string X, right? And the only thing that it's going to track, right, is whether or not M prime halts, whether or not M halts, right? So if M halts, right, either in a final state or in a non-final state, then M prime is going to have this extra transition to the state Q. Okay. So this is the reduction from LH to LR, which implies that LR is undecidable. So let's look at a slightly more complex example. So we saw this infiniteness property. Right? So this infiniteness property, L infinity, right? So this is the set of all languages which are infinite, right? So formally, right, it is the set of all Turing machines M, or rather their encodings, such that its language is infinite. So this property is not only undecidable, but it is not even recursively enumerable, right? So we'll use the second theorem, right, to show that this property is not even recursively enumerable. So note that this is a property, right, in the sense that this is a property in the context of Rice's theorem, right? But Rice's theorem doesn't say anything about recursively enumerable, right? So it just says that every property is undecidable, right? Every non-trivial property is undecidable, right? So that's why again we cannot directly use Rice's theorem here. So if you want to show that some language is not even recursively enumerable, then we have to demonstrate a reduction from another language that is known to be not recursively enumerable, okay, to this language. So we need to find another language which is not RE, and we need to give a reduction to L infinity. So we will use so what are the languages that we have seen which are not RE, right? So we have seen the diagonalization language, which is this LD, that's not recursively enumerable, and we have seen this complement of the halting problem, right? So which is this LH complement. So this language is also not recursively enumerable, right? So both of these languages are not RE. So we need to demonstrate a reduction from either of these two languages to this language L infinity. Okay. So we will use the complement of the halting problem in order to demonstrate L infinity. We'll find a reduction from the complement of the halting problem to L infinity. Okay. So just give me a minute because the slide is not updating. Okay, it's okay. Okay, so since we are trying to prove L infinity is the not recursively enumerable, we cannot use Rice's theorem, and we have to demonstrate a reduction from a non-RE language. So this non-RE language that we'll use is the complement of the halting problem. So this complement of the halting problem, uh, it contains strings of the form M11x such that M does not halt on X. Right? So let's see a reduction from M from this LCH to L infinity. So again, right, we have to take this description. So what are the strings in LCH, right? So these are strings of the form M11x such that M does not halt on X. So using this, I need to construct another Turing machine M prime such that if M does not halt on X, then the language of M prime is infinite, right? But if M does halt on X, then the language of M prime is finite. Okay? Uh, so I need to design this Turing machine M prime to satisfy this property. Okay, so let's see how we can do that. So given M11x, we need to construct M prime. Right? So what M prime is going to do, right? So M prime has its own input y. Okay. So M prime on some input y is going to simulate M on x, right? For this mod y number of steps, right? So this is the length of y. Okay. So for mod y number of steps, M prime is going to simulate M on X. Okay. And if after this mod y number of steps, right, if M has not halted on X, right, so after mod y number of steps of simulating M on X, right, either M has already halted on X or M has not halted on X. Right? So if M has not halted on X, then since this mod y is finite number, right, so the strings are of finite length, right, its input strings are going to be of finite length. So if after this finite number of steps, which is the mod y number of steps, if M has not halted on X, then M prime is going to halt and it is going to accept Y, right? But on the other hand, uh, Right? If within this mod y steps, m had already halted on x, then m is going to halt, but it is going to reject y. Okay. So on the input string y, right, m prime is going to simulate m on x for the length of the input string. Okay. Uh, and if within this length of the input string, right, within the number of steps that is equal to the length of the input string, if m has not halted, then m prime is going to halt and accept y. And if m has halted, then m is going to reject. Then m prime is going to reject y. Right? So I should probably say m prime here. So this is m prime. Right? So m prime is going to halt, and it is going to reject y. Okay. So what is the language now of m prime? Right. So let's look at this. Right. So if m does not halt on x, then the language of m prime is actually the set of all strings. So if m does not halt on x, right, then no matter what input you give to m prime, right, uh, it's so m prime is going to simulate m for those number of steps that are equal to the length of this input. But since m is never going to halt on x, right, there is basically no input string, right, such that uh, whose length, right, would if you simulate the number of steps equal to the length of the input string, m is going to halt on x, right, because m never halts on x. So therefore m prime is going to accept every string that is present in sigma star, right? So every input string is going to be accepted by m prime. So in this case, the language of m prime is actually infinite. Right? So this is the first thing that we wanted to achieve, right? So we wanted to say that if m does not halt on x, then the language of m prime must be infinite. So we have achieved that, right? But okay. So the second thing that we have to achieve is that if m does halt on x, right, then the language of m prime should not be infinite. It's in fact it should be finite, and we have achieved that as well, right? Because let's say m does halt on x, right? So it will halt on x after some n number of steps. Okay, so then the language of m prime is then going to consist of all strings of length n minus 1 or smaller. Okay, so the reason is that if you take strings of length n minus 1 or smaller, then after simulating m on x for those number of steps, right, for n minus 1 or smaller, obviously m is not going to halt, right? But for strings of length n or greater, right, m is going to halt on x, right? So that means that all of those strings of length n or greater are going to be rejected by m prime. So therefore, the language of m prime is only going to consist of all strings of length n minus 1 or smaller, and this is a finite set, right? Because there are only a finite number of strings with length n minus 1 or smaller. Okay, so therefore, the language of m prime is finite. Okay, so we have demonstrated. So this means that we have demonstrated that this is actually a reduction, right? That if m11x belongs to this complement of the halting problem, then if and only if m prime is going to belong to L infinity. Okay. So if m does not halt on x, then m prime is going to have an infinite language, and if m does halt on x, then m prime is going to have a finite language. Okay. So now we are ready to tackle Rice's theorem. Okay. So we have seen that recursive languages are closed into complementation, and we have looked at the theory of reductions. Right, we have seen multiple examples of reductions. Right? And in Rice's theorem, we are actually going to come up with another reduction. Okay, so what does Rice's theorem say? Right, so Rice's theorem says that LP, right, is undecidable. Right? Where this P is a property. It's a non-trivial property, which means that there is so there is an RE language which satisfies the property, and there is an RE language which does not satisfy the property. Okay, and I want to know, right? So given some arbitrary Turing machine M, does the language of M satisfy the property or not? Okay, so that is and we would show that LP is undecidable. Okay. So show that for every non-trivial property P of RE languages, LP is undecidable. So we'll do this by reducing the membership problem LU to LP. Okay, so again, in order to show that some language is undecidable, right, I need to take another known undecidable language and reduce that to the given language. Right? So I know that LU is undecidable, so LU is the membership problem, and therefore I'm going to reduce that to LP. Right? So I could have as well picked the halting problem. So in fact, you can try that as well as homework, right? That reduce the halting problem to this LP. So the membership problem is uh, contains strings of the form M11X such that X belongs to the language of M. So since we know that LU is undecidable, and if we can show this reduction, right, from LU to LP, that would imply that LP is also undecidable. Okay, so let's look at what is the reduction that we are looking at, right? So we are given strings of the form M11X such that X belongs to L of M, and we want to find out and we want to reduce this to another Turing machine M prime, right? Such that X belongs to L of M if and only if this M prime has the property P, right? So this means that this M prime belongs to LP. Right? Or in other words, L of M prime has property P. So how do we design this Turing machine M prime? Right? So our reduction algorithm must take M and X and produce a Turing machine M prime. And L of M prime has the property P if and only if M accepts W. So M prime, right? So this M prime is going to have two tapes, right? So it's going to use the first tape for simulating another Turing machine ML on the input to M prime. Okay, and on the second tape it is going to simulate M on X. So there are too many Turing machines here, so let's just make things clearer, right? So I have the Turing machines M, which is the Turing machine of the membership problem, right? So there is this another Turing machine ML, which I'm shortly going to demonstrate, right, what that Turing machine is. But this M prime Turing machine, right, is basically going to simulate ML on one of its tape, and it's going to simulate M on another tape, right? And it's going to simulate ML on the input to M prime, and it's going to simulate M on X. Okay. So here we assume that the empty set, which is phi, does not have the property P. Okay. So this is an assumption that we make. Okay. Uh, so it is possible, right, that this assumption may not hold, right? So it's possible that the empty set would have the property P. So in which case we will then take the complement of the property P, right? Because if phi, right, the empty set, right, has P, then this would imply that phi does not satisfy the complement of the property, right? So in which case we'll basically prove that L not of P, right, is basically which is the same as same as L complement of P. So in that case, we'll prove that L complement of P is undecidable, right? But we have just shown, right, that in the previous lemma, that if the complement is undecidable, then the original language is also undecidable, right? Or the other way around, right? That if the language is undecidable, then its complement is also undecidable, right? So both of them are actually the same statement, right? Because L complement and its complement is the language itself. So this is where we use the previous lemma, right? So hence we assume that phi does not have the property P, right? So what was this Turing machine ML, right, that we said earlier, right? So suppose L is some language which does have the property P, okay? And let ML be a Turing machine that accepts L, okay? So this is where we use the fact that the property P is non-trivial, which means that there is a Turing machine uh, which whose language has the property P, and there is another Turing machine whose language does not have the property P. Right? So in this case, we assume that the empty language, right, does not have the property P, which means that any Turing machine whose language is empty will not satisfy the property P. And there is some Turing machine whose language does satisfy the property P, right? So we pick one of those Turing machines, right? So which is this Turing machine ML, right? So at the moment, we are not saying that this L is even recursive, right? So remember that this is a property of recursively enumerable languages, right? So there will exist some recursively enumerable language, which is L, that is going to have the property P, okay? And let ML be the Turing machine for that particular language L. So we just said, right, that M prime is going to have two tapes. So on the second tape, this M prime is going to write down the input X, and then it's going to simulate M on X. Okay. So this is the very first thing that M prime is going to do, right? So M prime is given the description M11X, right? So it simulates M on X. Okay. Now at some point, right, the simulation may stop, right, and M would accept X. So if M accepts X, then M prime is going to shift to the first tape, right, and then it's going to start simulating ML on the input Y to M prime, right, which appears initially on the first tape. Okay. So remember that M prime has the input Y. Okay. So in the beginning, M prime is going to ignore that input and it's going to simulate M on X. If M holds and accepts X, then M prime is going to shift to the first state, and it's going to operate on the input Y, but it's going to simulate ML on this input. Okay. And then M prime is going to accept its input Y if and only if ML accepts Y. Okay. So this is the action of M prime. So we are only considering the case where M accepts W. Okay. So this is M prime. Okay. So M prime has the input Y. Okay. And as I said, first it is going to simulate M on X. Okay. And if M accepts X, then it's going to simulate ML on the input Y. Okay. And if ML accepts Y, then M prime is also going to accept Y. And if ML rejects Y, then M prime is also going to reject Y. So it will accept if and only if Y is an ML. Right? So in this case, you can notice, right, that the language of M prime is basically going to be the same as the language of ML, right, which is the language L. But we know that L has the property P, right? So this means that we have basically shown that if X belongs to L of M, then that means that this language of M prime, right, has property P, right? And which in turn means that this M prime belongs to LP. So what's yeah. So this is just what I said, right? That if M accepts X, then M prime simulates ML, and this means that language of M prime is equal to L, which in turn means that language of M prime has the property P and M prime is in LP. So what happens if M does not accept X? Right? So this can either happen because M rejects X, right? Which means M moves into a non-final state and halts, or M never halts, right? So in this case, let's say that M were to halt in a non-final state, then M prime is never going to start the simulation of ML, right? And therefore it's never going to accept its input file. And so essentially M prime will move into an infinite loop, right, if M halts and rejects X. Okay. And if M itself never halts on X, then M prime is also never going to halt the simulation of M on X. So in this case, M prime is never going to accept its input file. So therefore the language of M prime is essentially the empty set phi, right, if M does not accept X. And we just assumed that the empty set phi does not have the property P, and that's why in this case the M prime is not going to belong to L of P. Okay. So this is the action of M prime if M does not accept its input, right? So this should be X. So if right, so the input that is given is Y, okay, to M prime. So this is the machine M prime. So M prime is first simulating M on its input. So this is X again. Okay. And if M does not accept X, right, then M prime is just going to basically reject its input. Okay. So it never accepts anything, and so nothing else happens. And X is, and in this case, the input Y is also not accepted. So therefore, its language is empty. So to conclude, right, this M11X belongs to L of U if and only if M prime belongs to LP, right? So if X is present in L of M, then M prime, the language of M prime has the property P, and if X does not belong to L of M, then the language of M prime does not have the property P. So this is a proper reduction, right? And this basically converts M and its input to M prime. So since the membership problem LU is undecidable, this means that this property P problem, right, is also undecidable. So LP is also undecidable, and that is the conclusion of the proof for Rice's theorem. Okay. So just to give a picture of this reduction, right? So given M and X, right? We basically so we have this reduction algorithm, right, which converts it into this description of M and X to this machine M prime, right? And this machine M prime has the property P if X belongs to L of M. M prime does not have the property P if X does not belong to L of M, right? So if there was to be some hypothetical algorithm, right, or some Turing machine which decides the property P, then then you would basically solve the membership problem, right? Because you can then combine these two Turing machines in order to solve the membership problem. But we know that the membership problem is undecidable, and therefore such a hypothetical algorithm for property P also cannot exist. Okay. Right. So with that, I'm going to end the lecture today, and thank you.